Hello everyone and welcome to Automating Database Migrations to Oracle Cloud, eliminating operational risk, which also includes autonomous database migrations. My name is Akshay Sangavkar and I work as a product manager in Enterprise Manager team. And today we are going to talk about this particular topic, which also highlights a new feature for database migration, Workbench. This is the agenda for today, why we need to migrate, the Enterprise Manager for Oracle Cloud Migrations. We will also introduce the Enterprise Manager Migration Workbench, which is available from Enterprise Manager 13.4 Release Update 7 version. Then we will have a quick demo of this Migration Workbench solution. And then we will also briefly touch upon how Enterprise Manager helps customers migrate their databases in on-premise data center. So why migrate? When it comes to migration use cases, typically these use cases fall into any of these three different criterias. Migrating to Oracle Cloud, wherein customers want to migrate to autonomous database, database cloud service, or Exadata Cloud at customer, or Exadata Cloud at customer as well. Or they would like to move to multi-tenant, wherein they are moving from the older versions of databases like 11G or 12.2 and then moving to 19C as multi-tenant. And in the process, they would like to consolidate as many databases as possible. Or if they are upgrading their infrastructure, so if they are obsoleting older hardware platforms and moving to new platforms, and in the process, they are also looking at database upgrade options. So Enterprise Manager helps customers address all these use cases, and we will look into all these use cases in detail. We will first start with migration to Oracle Cloud. So when we talk to customers about their migration needs, usually all administrators or the user who are migrating their databases to cloud categorize their requirement into five basic questions. So the first question is about what databases can I consolidate? So if I consolidate multiple databases, how can I identify them? How can I find dependencies between these databases? Okay. And then we have what mechanism should I use to perform the migration? So today Oracle supports multiple methods to migrate databases. So which mechanism suits my architecture or the database topology best way so that I do not have any data loss or it achieves my migration goals like faster migrations or zero downtime migrations, minimum downtime migration, or only the schema based migrations, partial migrations, etc. So what are my goals and how can I achieve them in entirety? And then how does my new environment compare against my old environment? So what objects have been migrated successfully? How do I analyze the overall migration process? And what is the performance before the migration of these databases and what's the performance after migration of these databases? Now, along with these questions, during the migration process, all these users expect the migration process to be a secure, efficient, and agile migration process, wherein all these bits are automated in completeness. You can split these requirements into three categories: plan, migrate, and analyze. So these three phases define the entire end-to-end migration process. In the plan phase, usually users do the consolidation estimate, that what is the overall impact of consolidating multiple databases into a single container database. They also do dependency analysis as to how many databases should I migrate as part of my migration process immediately to just to make one application up and running. In the migration phase, they try to choose the right migration method suitable for their environment. So it can be a data pump based migration, it can be a RMAN based migration, advanced data guard based migration, transportable table spaces, or a zero downtime migrations, etc. And in the analysis phase, they try to compare schemas from the source and destination database, and then just make sure that the migration is complete and successful. All the necessary objects have been migrated successfully to destination database. They also do a quick performance comparison of the source database and destination database, and just make sure that the performance of the application either remains the same on destination database, and their application can be up and running without any issues. Considering all these goals and three different phases, we have introduced Enterprise Manager Migration Workbench, which helps user consolidate, migrate, and analyze the databases. This is the overall migration workbench process that we see. So on the left hand side, we have an application which is created by multiple databases. And the first target to do the sizing advisor as to what should be the size of my destination database so that I can consolidate all these databases together. Usually, a migration planner is the tool that is used in Enterprise Manager to do this kind of impact analysis for consolidation and also get a sizing information. Now, once we have this information handy, you can actually move the data using Migration Workbench. So you can migrate data to autonomous or non-autonomous database today, but we are soon introducing other features to migrate data to database cloud services as well. Now, once the migration process is complete, you can analyze the performance and accuracy after migration. Again, a migration workbench provides you out-of-box reports to do these accuracy checks and also the performance comparison. Now, during the process, Migration Workbench also helps migrate some of the configurations and target properties on the source database and moves them to the destination database. So it's easy to bring up the database as early as possible once the migration process is complete. The overall migration process looks like this one, wherein the user first creates a migration activity, and we call it as a migration, just in brief. So once the migration activity is created, they can customize these migrations. They can add or configure, override the out-of-box parameters. They can add in their own customizations with pre and post scripts. Then the analysis of source database, wherein users can analyze the source database for accuracy and all the objects and understand what objects will migrate to autonomous database successfully and what objects needs corrections. Then they can schedule and submit migrations. So at this time, we also provide an option to user to just to create a JSON file and download that JSON file and use it either in the REST API or submit it via UI. Now, once the migration is submitted using Migration Workbench, users can view migration details, wherein they can track a step-by-step progress of the migration activity, or they can analyze the data transfer, wherein they can see what objects have migrated successfully and what objects could not make to destination database and what is the root cause of such objects. They can also compare performance from the out-of-box report that is generated in Migration Workbench. Now, once the migration process is complete, they can either clean up the entire data. Uh, Cleanup means the intermediate storage or object storage um, buckets, etc. Or they can mark the migration as completed, wherein the administrators will say that this particular migration activity has been certified and verified, and they can add their own comments. The overall networking is described here. So we have an Enterprise Manager Cloud Control running in on-premise network, and it's monitoring a source database via EM agent deployed on a host where source database is running. We also have another EM agent, which is either used for autonomous database monitoring. We have recently introduced these remote monitoring capabilities for autonomous database. Since autonomous database do not have a host directly associated with it, the any enterprise manager agent running in data center can be used to monitor autonomous database remotely. So users can use any of these EM agents, or they can also use the local EM agent running on source database host to move the export dump to object store, provided there is a connectivity. And once the exported data is uploaded to object store, enterprise manager imports this data in autonomous database using internal APIs. So if there is no network connectivity, we also provide support for proxy, wherein users can let the EM agent deployed into a DMZ zone to upload data to object store. But ideally, we recommend to have a fast connect or IPsec VPN connection between Oracle Cloud and on-premise data center, at least the EM agent. Now let's look into some of the details about the feature in Migration Workbench. So as you can see on the top right, we have marked this particular set of features as plan. So most of these features are used in planning phase. So database migration workbench works as a single workbench that integrates all needs of migrations, including sizing, performance comparison, etc. Users can track migrations in real time. They can also customize migration workflows. They can pause, roll back, and cancel the entire workflow. So they can view the existing migrations and then take a call on those migrations where they would like to roll back the migration and restart a new migration activity, or they would like to continue with existing migration activities. It also helps them estimate what is a source workload to identify resource utilization needs on destination database. So they can estimate the size, identify the dependencies between various databases, run multiple sizing scenarios and best match. Usually some of these things are done automatically by enterprise manager, and we usually give the coarse grained analysis from the migration planner as well. You also have the options for aggressive, medium, and conservative sizing using Migration Planner. The Schema Advisor helps users understand what objects will be moved to autonomous database successfully and what objects needs correction. So it lists objects that cannot migrate due to lockdown or restrictions on certain data types. Then the database options that do not apply on the destination database. So if you are migrating to autonomous database, then certain database options are not allowed on either autonomous data warehouse or autonomous transaction processing, depending upon the deployment type that you use, whether it is serverless or dedicated, etc. And based on that, the Schema Advisor will flag in advance as to what database options will not be applicable on destination database, and accordingly show the list of objects that cannot be migrated to destination database. There are certain set of objects that can be migrated, but with a list of changes, and those will also be listed. As you can see in the snapshot on the right hand side, there are the list of objects that will be migrated with changes. The overall landscape of the migration workbench looks like this, and this is a kind of a little in future as well, wherein we are going to support the additional service types. But the goal here is to support the unified experience irrespective of your destination database type. So if you are going to migrate to autonomous database, the experience should remain as it is when you are migrating to either database cloud service or ExaCC or ExaCS or even on-premise databases as well. We also provide migration options using multiple configurations. So today we support only data pump based migrations, but soon we will be adding support for other migration options, including transportable table spaces and the PDB level options like unplug, plug, and relocate, etc. Migration Workbench works across all three different interfaces, including user interface, which we are going to see in the demo. Then we also have equivalent EMCLI verbs from Migration Workbench called as a Migrate DB verb that has been expanded to cover all use cases of Migration Workbench. And then we also have a REST API which can be used by customers to integrate with any third-party solutions. So you get a complete control of DevOps and you have a complete automation that can be put in place or integrate with, in general, your higher level of automation into enterprise. We also have an option to go for minimum downtime migrations. Typically, this is done using TTS flows, and we will discuss those as we go along, typically in case of on-premise migrations. The performance comparison feature is one of the most important feature that we are added to analyze the migrations. So the performance comparison works in a completely automated way. And enterprise manager takes care of doing multiple configurations behind the scenes. So migration workbench runs SPA on the source, captures a SQL tuning set. It can be done via either AWR report or it can be done by enabling STS collections in the source database. So we have both options available in Migration Workbench. Now, once we capture SQL tuning set, that we run trials before the migration and try to benchmark the performance on source database. Then along with database migration, the SQL tuning set is also migrated. And then we run trials again after migration is complete and try to capture the performance data after running SQL tuning set. Now, when we compare a SQL performance on the source and destination database, you get a side-by-side analysis or out-of-box report to see this analysis on migration workbench. And this is done out of box completely. So you don't have to do anything manually, just highlighting the steps, those will be run behind the scenes. This performance comparison is based on multiple factors. So you have the elapsed time to run a particular SQL statement, or you also have the CPU time that is spent while running a particular SQL statement. You have user I/O time, buffer gates, and physical I/O, optimizer cost, or I/O interconnect bytes. So all these parameters are considered when we show the performance comparison on source and destination database. Now, while doing so, we provide two options, either the DevOps grade performance comparison or production grade performance comparison. The DevOps grade performance comparison is kind of an out-of-box solution wherein no preparation is required. So you can, if you have a AWR collections enabled by default, which is usually the case, in that case, we just go ahead and then collect the data from AWR report for last 7 days, or you can also customize that particular part. But typically, out of box, we collect the data for last 7 days. We collect the top sequels for each day and prepare a SQL tuning set ourselves. So there is no preparation required. It's very simple and automatic. But when we collect top sequels from AWR, there might be chances that some of the SQL statements will be repeated and some of those SQL statements, important SQL statements, may be omitted because they did not run in last 7 days. So this particular approach do not assign any weightage to SQL tuning set, SQL statements in SQL tuning set. And that's the reason we have also introduced a production grade performance comparison, wherein user need to enable STS before start of migration. And as soon as new SQL statement is run, the STS is updated with the reports for this new SQL statement, and it is continuously being updated. So when users are performing migrations, they can just pick up the existing SQL tuning set. This is more accurate and flexible approach, but you need to start the STS collections before start of the migration. Now, once the migration is complete, user can also analyze how the migration has performed. So what objects have migrated successfully, and they can run through the analysis report. We will look at to all these features during our demo now. I'm on Enterprise Manager login page, and I'm going to log in as a migration administrator user. In release update 7, we have introduced a new menu for migration and consolidation under Enterprise. Let's go to Migration and Consolidation menu and click on Database Migration Workbench. This takes me to Database Migration landing page, wherein I see all the migration activities in the system. I see activities that have been completed and those are in progress. I can also filter on the date filter and search for migration activities in last few days. I can also click on Getting Started and review the overall migration process. Now let's create a new migration. Click on Create Migration Activity. This opens a wizard to create a new migration activity. The activity name is populated by default. If you want, you can change it. Next, let's define a scope for migration. It can be a full database migration, or you can migrate specific schemas. In this case, let's select full database migration. Next, select the source database to migrate. You can filter the list of databases using various filter criteria. You can filter it on target type, or you can also add new target properties from Enterprise Manager. Let's select sales database for migration. Now select the destination database. In this system, I have an warehouse database and a transaction processing database. I'm going to select autonomous transaction processing database as my destination database type for migration. When I select a database, all the details about a database are populated from the repository. In the tools validation section, we also see that Instant Client and ADB Schema Advisor are available in the software library, and they are up to date. If you would like to manually update these tools, you can do so using Upload Migration Tools button at the bottom of the screen. Let's continue with migration process. Click on Continue. On the next page, you can add more details about source, destination, and migration action. In my environment, the preferred credentials have been set for the sales database and the transaction processing database. So the normal database credentials and host credentials are selected based on my preferred settings. I'm going to select a service name for my destination database, and I will choose Hi TCPS as my service name. If you want, you can also see the connection descriptor. Let's select a source data pump directory. Enter encryption password and enter cloud storage URL. My cloud storage URL points me to the object storage from the data center where my transaction processing database is created. Next, enter the bucket name on this object store where the export dump file will be uploaded. Next, select OCI credential to connect to destination service. Click on Next. On the Customize page, you can customize the migration process. You can customize the export options and import options. You can override the default export and import options here. We also see the default options, which are displayed like remap table space and the options used in the transform phase. On the right hand side, we see compare performance after migration. Enterprise Manager automatically shows the performance comparison before and after migration to help administrators make a conscious decision about the success of migration. It automatically creates the SQL tuning set from AWR, or you can provide an option to choose an existing SQL tuning set. I'm going to keep the defaults as it is. The SQL tuning set will be created by Enterprise Manager using data from AWR for last 7 days. You can also add pre-migration script and post-migration script. Pre-migration script will be called before start of the migration and post-migration script will be called after the completion of migration. Now let's review all these inputs. Once all inputs are reviewed and verified, you can analyze the source database. Click on Analyze Source button. Enterprise Manager pre-installs Schema Advisor. To run Schema Advisor across multiple schemas, Enterprise Manager also creates a user. Enter sysdba privileges to allow Enterprise Manager to create a new user and run Schema Advisor. Schema Advisor will be run in background and a report will be generated. While Schema Advisor report is being generated, let's validate all inputs. Enterprise Manager runs multiple validation checks to make sure that the source database and destination database follow all the validations successfully. It runs multiple checks on the source database, verifies export options, runs dump directory validations, object store validations, then source database validations and destination database validations. All login credentials are verified. You can also see this validation deployment procedure in a usual deployment procedure activity page in Enterprise Manager. All validations in this case are successful. So let's close the validation window. Now let's go to another tab and then see the analysis report for source database. Here we see the report generated by Enterprise Manager after running of Schema Analyzer. We see the summary of all objects, then the objects that won't get migrated, the objects that will get migrated with few changes, and some additional information about migration. If you expand any of these sections, you will find more details about the objects in each category. So here is a list of all the objects that won't get migrated. I see that objects from sys schema are not getting migrated, but objects from user schemas will be migrated. So let's go back and then submit the migration activity. Confirm that you have done source analysis. Database Migration Workbench also allows you to view JSON and then copy JSON if you would like to submit migration activity using command line tools. Migration activity has been submitted successfully. So let's go back and then view the status from activities page. This is the activity that has been just submitted. The status is in progress. Click on the activity name to view more details about the activity. This takes us to the procedure activity page, and you can see the detail of all the steps being run at this moment. This is very useful to monitor the progress of migration activity in real time. Now let's go back and explore some other activity that was run earlier. Let's see the analysis of this activity. The analysis report shows the analysis of all the objects which are migrated as part of the migration activity. On the left, we see the validation phase, and all the validations were successful in this phase. During export phase, all the objects were exported successfully except three, but in import, there were many failures. In the object errors section, we see details about the objects that could not be imported. The first object, FGA policy, was not being imported because the policy already exists. This section shows more details about each error, and the administrators can take a call whether this is a lenient error or it is a fatal error. You can also see the details of other errors and other data pump options. You can also see the dump file locations in the object store from this page. Now let's go back. Now let's see compare performance reports. Performance comparison reports show the performance of the database before the migration and after the migration. Enterprise Manager generates a SQL tuning set before the migration, migrates SQL tuning set to the destination database, and runs trial on destination database to compare performance. By default, performance comparison report includes all objects, including indexes. For autonomous databases, it is recommended that you leave the performance optimization to auto-indexing feature. If you would like to disable indexes in the destination database and want to assess that how the performance is looking like at the time of migration, you can suppress the indexes and perform comparison. To compare performance with no indexes, click on the Show Performance Comparison with no indexes. It will generate another report wherein the indexes will be excluded. Now let's go back. To certify this migration, you can click on Mark as completed. Mark as completed feature allows administrators to mark a particular migration as verified and successful. Once the migration is marked as completed, the status of the activity changes. This concludes the demo. Okay, so let's come back to slide deck and see the summary of features that we just discussed during the demo. So in the planning phase, we have a source selector that allows users to query EM repository and find relationships between the databases, and also select a subset of the databases of their interest. So users can query based on the various properties that have been set for databases. Then Migration Workbench provides unified guided wizard. So to provide a unified migration experience for all types of migrations, including the on-premise migrations, which we are going to discuss pretty soon. And then we also have the Schema Advisor. In the migrate phase, Migration Workbench helps with EM deployment procedures for live tracking or real-time monitoring of the migration job. You can also schedule and submit migration options. You can pause and resume various migrations. You can also customize migrations using pre and post scripts and auto-generate a JSON file to integrate with any third-party tools. And in the analyze phase, you can have a post-migration analyzer report that shows the objects that have been migrated successfully. And you can also check the out-of-box report for performance analysis. So in general, Migration Workbench helps simplify the migration of on-premise databases to cloud. It expedites the migration process by automating the end-to-end workflow. Otherwise, user would have spent a lot of time integrating all these things together. They would do a manual setup for most of these things, and then real-time monitoring of the migration job becomes extremely difficult. This also reduces downtime by providing a real-time progress of migration and estimate as to how much more time is needed to complete migration and generally move the applications to cloud. Then improves the accuracy of migration by providing automatic comparison of performance before and after migrations. So we have seen customers using typically for these four reasons, the end-to-end migrations, end-to-end automation for migration using Migration Workbench. Now let's see some of the on-premise migrations using Enterprise Manager. So we have many features for on-premise migrations, and we are in the process of integrating them into Migration Workbench as well to provide end-to-end automation. So traditionally, some of our customers have used the verbs, various verbs for migrating their on-premise databases into multi-tenant within the on-premise data center itself. So migrating non-CDB to PDB is the primary use case, and there are three different ways in which it is supported today using the legacy approach of what we call it as the XML-based approach. So it can be done using the conventional export import, full transportable tablespace export import with RMAN, and then clone using non-CDB verbs. So multiple methods to support migrations from non-CDB to PDB. This supports various database configurations, single instance rack 1, etc. The EMCLI is already available, and UI for multiple options is also available. Currently, we are in the process of integrating all these into Migration Workbench to have this end-to-end experience for the users, right from the planning phase to migration and an analysis phase. But you can still go ahead and then use this to perform on-premise migrations also. So the first method is conventional data pump, wherein you can do the logical migrations from non-CDB to PDB. It supports the database versions of 11.204 onwards. It helps in multiple use cases wherein you would like to do the schema-based migration or full database migration. You can also do the cross database version migrations. You can do the cross-platform or Indian-based. However, it doesn't handle the complete cross-platform use cases. You can typically do the compatible platforms using data pump, but if you would like to have a completely cross-platform migrations, then the recommended approach is to go for transportable tablespace. And it also has a portability across character sets, wherein the character sets follow the one character set is subset of the other character set, etc. Then you can also have a post-migration report to check a migration status as to how the migration has performed. However, this particular method requires a little longer downtime and usually recommended for a small size of databases. This is being a logical migration, it is slightly slow. So if you have a smaller subset of the data to be migrated, either from non-container to pluggable database, then you would like to split the schema into multiple data sets and then migrate the data set into a different multi-tenant, then this is the ideal option to go for. Then we have full transportable tablespace import export with RMAN. This is a widely used method to migrate in phased manner, wherein you would like to complete all the preparatory steps before actually taking the downtime. So it combines the data pump, a full transportable tablespace with incremental RMAN backups to minimize downtime, wherein you would be preparing the steps like ARM and incremental backups, and then finally the downtime would be required just to switch the bits, wherein all the preparations would be already taken up, and in the final phase you are just going to finalize saying that okay, I would just like to move my data in the final steps, and at that time we will just find out the delta in after the last backup which has been migrated, and we will just migrate the delta after that. So supported database versions 11.04 onwards. Supports cross DB version migrations, cross-platform, cross-Indianness migrations, and also is a compatible character set migrations. Now, this can be used for larger databases as since this combines the RMAN-based and data pump-based methodologies. Yeah, it's faster than other logical migration. So it combines the physical and logical migration ways, and that's why it's a little faster than the other methods. The last one that I want to mention is about cloning approach, wherein you would clone a non-container database as a multi-tenant or PDB. This supports a database link-based migrations by plugging the non-container database. The supported database versions are 12 onwards. The benefits are cross DB version, cross platform, same Indianness, and character set needs to be compatible. The advantage of this approach is that it doesn't require any intermediate storage while migrating the data. So usually in the data pump or transportable table space, you either take a export dump, store it in some intermediate location, and then import it into destination database. But in this case, this is being a DB link based migrations. We are just creating internally the database links from between source and destination, and then migrating the data over these DB link based operations. And this has the EMCLI support today. So you can integrate into your automation directly using the EMCLIs. These are the examples of these verbs. So on the left hand side, we see the example of cloning approach, wherein we have the EMCLI DB clone management, and you can specify multiple options or configuration parameters here. For data pump and full DTS, we use a verb called as migrate DB, wherein you provide XML file and also support the execution mode, which is kind of a minimum downtime, or you would like to go for other operation modes. Now, summarizing the entire discussion, on the left-hand side, we have multiple options for migrating databases. So, in, using Enterprise Manager, you can migrate database either on-premise or we generally call it as IaaS flavors. So you have multiple ways to migrate databases on various IaaS flavors, either running in OCI or Azure or AWS or within on-premise data center as well. You can go for provisioning based approach wherein you create a gold image of the source database and deploy that gold image anywhere. You can create a PDB, empty or with data using this provisioning approach. And if you would like to go for cloning and migration based approach, we discussed most of these operations today, like DB link based cloning, backup and recovery, data pump export import, or TTS, transportable table spaces. We also have this migration of non-CDB to PDB using any of these methods. Now, when it comes to the migrations to cloud, we currently support auto migrations to autonomous database, which has gone GA in RU7 using migration workbench. And it uses the data pump method today, but soon we will be adding other methods into migration workbench to support migrations to cloud as well as on-premise. Now, what's after migration? So once the database is migrated to cloud, you need to manage the databases in cloud. And for that, Enterprise Manager provides multiple features. So this session is primarily focused on migrations, but we also have other recordings that you can go through for managing databases in cloud, wherein you can manage the databases either in your on-premise data center or on any of these IaaS flavors or VMs running in any of these cloud to manage the complete database lifecycle. So provisioning, patching, config compliance, etc. Or you can also manage and monitor the path-based deployments wherein database cloud service is running in VM and VM and perform a multi-tenant management to provision multi-tenant or clone refresh, unplug, plug, relocate, delete multi-tenants, etc. We also have a unified self-service portal wherein administrators can publish the approved service catalog and self-service users can directly provision databases from this approved service catalog, and that is also available for DBCS running on VM and PM. Now, uh, if you would like to learn more about these things, we have a dedicated page on OTN for database migration. We also have a white paper which is published on this paper page. Then we have a screen watch which shows you the brief demo and then the overview of migration workbench. And we also have a micro video that helps you see the overall features of migration workbench. So if you would like to circulate this within your org, you can just share the link of this OTN page. We have recently added the deep dive migration workbench step-by-step guide, and that will be available on this particular page pretty soon. Uh, that's all. It brings me to the end of my presentation. Now we are open for question and answers. So please use the console to submit your questions, or you can also ask them live. We have uh, engineering team as well as some of other representatives from product management team who will help us get answers to the questions.